Buying your property is probably going to be one of the most exciting times of your life, and I'm sure you're going to be eager to get started. So, here are my top tips and advice for what to do when you first buy your property. Let's get to it. My first piece of advice for anyone that's just purchased their first property is to prioritize your goals. Prioritizing your goals will help you develop a high level strategic plan for what you're going to be buying, what activities you're going to be doing, and what you can look forward to in your short term and long term future. When we first bought this property, my first and biggest goal was to start a food forest. But I soon realized that it was more important for us to grow food and store food for the long term so that we could save money and get the biggest bang for our buck. And starting a food forest strategically wasn't the best way to do that. So instead, we started a vegetable garden. And we're still interested in doing all of those other things, but it's important for you to do what matters to your family the most first. My second piece of advice would be to evaluate what you already have. You may have established trees, shrubs, or weeds already along your property line that you need to become familiar with. Maybe you have large fruit trees and you need a strategy for how you're going to harvest that fruit. My husband and I got really excited about some cherry trees that we realized we were gifted. But when we couldn't reach the top of the trees, it was a bit disappointing. So you want to factor those things in. If you need ladders or cherry pickers or whatever that is, you want to factor that in. If you have fruiting shrubs like blackberries and raspberries, you might offset some costs that you had planned to spend originally on those fruits. So it's good to know that they're there. Honeysuckles and roses are all great for bees, and they could be great for medicinal purposes as well. So it's good to know that those things are there. Also, if there's poisonous weeds like poison ivy, it's good to know where those areas are so that you can come up with a plan for how you're either going to avoid those areas or get rid of it if you're, planting in those areas. Something else to consider while you're evaluating what you have is to appreciate it too, especially the shady areas. When I first began the search looking for a property, my heart was set on a clear field so that I can build from scratch. But in reality, the shady areas provided some much needed relief while we're planting in the summer months. And also, a lot of plants don't like that direct sunlight. So you can take advantage of growing some cabbage and lettuce and shade loving plants in these areas. So it's not always a curse when you have lots of trees on your property. Take advantage of it. After evaluating everything that we had, not only did we have cherry trees, blackberries, raspberries, persimmons, we also had pawpaws. Pawpaws is something that we never heard of before buying this property. And come to find out, it is like the tropical East Coast fruit. And it's like a mix of a mango and a banana. We have pretty much a pawpaw forest back here, and we've been using it to make smoothies and banana bread. But I will caution you, if you are trying anything new for the first time, to try it in small quantities, research it, make sure it's good to go. Because even though it was delicious for my husband, it wasn't so good on my stomach. So make sure you're being careful, but definitely take a look at what you may have out there. Continuing the topic with evaluating what you have, you want to know where your utilities are. So, where's your septic field? Where's your propane tank? Before moving into this property, I did a lot of planning about where I wanted to place the garden. And I wanted to place it in this nice, beautiful southeast southern region of the home. It's the perfect place for a garden. But after moving in, I realized and soon found out that this is the septic field. And you don't want to grow any edible plants in your septic field. So you want to know these things as you're planning and you're thinking these things through. Now we know that we can instead grow flowers here. So it's still beneficial. It's not really a curse, but we want to know that ahead of time. Now that you've finished evaluating and observing, you can start planning. And before you put pencil to paper, I recommend that you research whatever method it is that you're going to use for whatever project it is you're starting first. For us, it was the food forest in the garden. I knew that the food forest edges were really important. So I ashamedly asked my brother to haul compost across the field to start the edges of the food forest. But one thing I neglected, one of the big points of permaculture is permaculture zones. So permaculture zones encourage you to plant the things that you're going to need the most or most frequently closest to the house, which was the exact opposite of what I was doing. So I was hauling things across the field. So take into consideration permaculture zones, even if that's not your thing, because it could be important for how you're going to harvest and store your food. Now you want to start gathering a list of all of the supplies you're going to need for whatever project it is that you're going to engage on. For me, it was the food forest and the veggie garden, which means I needed to start seeds. Originally, I started seeds in my office in the cabinets. It put grow lights in the top of the cabinets, and it worked fine for a small garden. But if you plan on growing for a longer amount of time or for a larger family, you might want to consider getting a greenhouse. And it doesn't have to be this big, or you can consider one of those greenhouse shelves. Those are good too. But you need something to get started. You're also going to need your seed trays, seed soil, compost, mulch, all of those things to help with weeds in the garden. My biggest suggestion is for you to order compost and mulch in bulk. 1 cubic yard of compost costs about $50. 1 cubic yard of compost is about 27 bags of soil from Lowe's or Home Depot. So you do the math on that. You would save a lot of money just by doing some research and calling some of your local tree cutting companies. Don't feel like an imposter. Don't feel intimidated. It will really be good for your wallet. When you're planning your seed purchase, I want to caution you that sometimes it can get addictive and you can get a little crazy. Just remember that everything you put in the ground is going to require work. The more you plant, the more work it's going to require and resources. You have to water, you have to prune, you have to harvest, you have to retire the plant. So keep that in mind. The more you plant, the more work and resources that are going to be required. While you're gathering your purchase items for your seeds, your compost, and your plants, you might want to also think about what equipment you're going to need to put those things in the ground. So shovels, pitchforks, hoes, tillers, whatever it is for the method that you're going to be using. I am a big fan of kind of reinventing the wheel sometimes and being creative. And I don't let things stop me from trying to get my goals accomplished. So if I don't have a wheelbarrow, sometimes I'll use a wagon, or maybe we'll put stuff on a blanket and drag it across the field. We don't let things stop us, but it will be easier for you to pay for some good quality equipment. That way you're saving time, money, and your body is not really that affected by all of your hard work. My next big piece of advice is to figure out your watering situation early on in the process. Whether it be drip irrigation, sprinklers, soaker hoses, get the layout together before you do any major plantings. It'll save you time and effort in the long run. We planted apple trees in this area next to our 2 peach trees and our 3 pear trees. And those apple trees did not make it. And rest in peace to those apples, because our hoses did not make it out to where we planted the apple trees. Every other tree got water but the apple trees. So we really should have took that into consideration before planting them. When you are trying to take care of a garden, you are starting seeds, you are watering trees and all of that. It is a lot of work to try to keep up with the watering. It's hot outside, it's a lot of effort. So try to look for automatic solutions that will reduce your time and effort. Whether you're growing food or raising animals, you're going to need a place to store your supplies and or your food. For us, we've used our detached garage. We stored potatoes here last year. We also store supplies that don't fit in the greenhouse. So whatever you do, carve out some space and take into account how much you're going to be growing or how many supplies you're going to need for your projects. If you're storing food, you may need more than just a detached garage for root vegetables. You may also consider adding a deep freezer to your garage or to your home because growing lots of vegetables can sometimes create waste if you don't have a place to put it. And your refrigerator can get pretty packed with vegetables in the summertime. So consider adding a deep freezer. I would also suggest learning a new skill like pressure canning. You can pressure can meats and vegetables and fruits, and it will last for years. So clean out your pantry, learn how to pressure can, and store all of your vegetables in your pantry for long term use. Although you may spend lots of hours and even days, weeks, and months evaluating and observing your property, planting and harvesting and storing food, I still wouldn't bank on your first year being your best year because you're still learning. Chances are, if you're watching me, you're still learning, and I am still learning along with you. So don't bank on your first year. For me, I planted this peach tree, and the following year, I had lots of flowers on this tree, and I was so excited. We were 100% going to get peaches, but we got a late frost, and we lost every single one of those peaches. So even if you do everything perfectly, you never know what the outcome will be with Mother Nature. My next piece of advice is not to rush. You have to remember that there are constraints, whether you want to acknowledge them or not. There are scope, time, and cost. So if you want to increase the scope, you might have to increase the time or the cost. If you want to shorten the time, you might have to decrease the scope or increase your cost. If you want to shorten your cost, you might have to lengthen your project or you might have to decrease the scope. So keep that in mind. It applies to projects and it also applies to any of your garden activities. This raised garden bed is an example of me trying to rush things and do too much. This was a birdie's garden bed that was a push present for giving birth to my son. And my husband got four of these, and we have only put one together, and my son is 2 years old. It's because we were trying to keep up with the latest trends of raised garden beds. But it really just increase our scope. So having to fill these beds and to kind of rearrange our garden to accommodate the beds was a bit more than what we needed at that time, especially just having a newborn. So what did we do? We shelved this idea, even though these are great quality beds, we shelved the idea for a later time because at the end of the day, we have to give ourselves grace. And, honestly, we're on our own timelines. So if you don't meet your goal in your predetermined timeline, don't beat yourself up about it. You're on your own schedule. My next suggestion is to make sure that you take advantage of your resources. I am talking YouTube, books, websites, TV shows, whatever you can come up with that will help to educate you on whatever topic it is that you need to learn about. I have watched many great YouTubers all over the world, and they have inspired me and helped me to get to this place where we are right now and to motivate me to do more things and to be more creative and think outside the box. So look at YouTube, but also don't neglect books. A nice, good, old fashioned hard copy book is something that you can reference during times where you just need to have a question answered. If you don't feel like going to the web and you just want to put a bookmark in, you can also listen to Audible, but it's harder to kind of refer back to Audible books. But please educate yourselves. That way you have, some good information, good foundation before you get started. So those are my top tips for what to do when you first buy your property. I hope you learned something new. Please like, share, and subscribe. That really helps my channel. And if you have a comment or suggestion, please feel free to leave that below. Thanks for watching. Bye.